Warning, if you haven't watched the previous video to this one, stop what you're doing, go back, watch that. I think it's like a 20-30 minute video. If you watch that video, come on over to this video. They both tie in together, so that way you won't be lost if you are beginning to watch this video. So go back, watch that video before this video, and if you continue watching this video, it means you have watched the previous video, and it's going to segue into this video. We got some new things coming up, so pretty excited. But this video, we're going to continue airbrushing the art panel that I've started. I actually got ahead of myself again, like I always do, and started using the Valley Shade 1 that I mixed up. And I'm going to show you guys what it looks like real quick. It's just very light, so it's probably not going to look like it does in person on the camera, but I'll try to do my best to show you what it looks like. So as you tell, it's very, very light. This is the Value Shade 1 that I mixed up. I mixed up 4 altogether, and each one gets darker as we go. So if this is the lightest, you can tell what we're going for, and you can kind of see just a little bit of what it's going to look like. So really crazy right now. With this being the lightest shade, you pretty much are just mapping everything in. You're not doing any detail work. You're not really doing anything but other than creating shapes and different, shapes and sizes of shapes, just to get the general idea of where everything needs to go. And I always, like I said, work on the darker spots, so I'll fill those in first, and then I'll kind of just shade out towards that if that area needs shaded or whatever, what have you. And that's how I start creating my base layer. Like I said, just mapping it out, getting a feel for it. So now we're going to be moving on to Value Shade 2, which, like I said, it's a little bit darker. So I'm going to set you guys up on the tripod and run a time lapse so you guys can see side by side of me actually airbrushing this panel. But first, what I'm going to show you guys, I don't know if I've actually showed you the finished product of this, but I'm going to show you the customer's on his way to pick it up right now. So I'll show you before it gets picked up, but this is the finished product of the charger, the SEMA charger, the fenders and the motor. This is the final product before it's getting shipped out. So I'm going to show you guys that. Got some dirt on it, but these fenders, the car has the air ride on it, and somebody in another shop aired the car out and the tires crunched these fenders in. These corners right here were caved in, and it was buckled down here. So we went ahead and did all the body work. I did make a little video of this as well, so you can go back and watch this. And we did both of the fenders. Came out really, really nice. I'm super happy with them, and I know he's going to be happy with them. He's on his way to pick them up, so it's going to be his first time seeing them. And then the engine block, we did the same green. Came out really, really nice as well. So he's on his way to pick this up. Just wanted to show you guys that real quick before he gets here and it goes away, because probably won't see it ever again. I think he's bringing some more parts for it for me to paint. Some stuff that got damaged just because it's been sitting. He's been working on it slowly here and there. So obviously he's putting a newer motor in it. So he's slowly building it up again, making it look nice. So I think he's bringing the side skirts, he said. I'm not sure if he's bringing the hood for it. The hood, he said, needed some body work and painted. So we'll see what happens or what he brings when he gets here. But we're going to get to this panel, and like I said, I'm going to put the Value Shade number 2 in here, which is this one right here. That's 1. 2, I wiped the 2 off on accident, but this is the Value Shade 2. You can kind of see the difference of how lighter 1 is to 2, how much darker that is. Even though it looks dark, when you spray it out in the airbrush, it actually thins it out even more than what it's actually in there. Because in the bottle, it's pretty much as a whole. Now, when we spray it, it's gonna, like I said, it's gonna thin it out. So I'm gonna be able to get in there and get some really tight details in here and done. And how I'm gonna go about doing this, it's gonna be a sped up video, so you're not gonna see exactly what I'm doing. It's gonna go really, really quick. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna kind of explain it before I start that time lapse. I'm gonna start in the darkest areas first, and then I'm gonna start fading everything out. Obviously, I've got my photo reference. You always wanna have a reference of something. Now I'm gonna go through here and change a lot of this according to the picture. I have already changed some of it. That way it's not exactly like the picture, but it gives you a good idea of what needs to happen. So always have your reference next side by side to you. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna start in the dark areas first, kind of punch those out, and they're gonna look, it's gonna get really punched out because this is so light right now. Even with the white background, it's gonna really pull that darker color out. So you wanna try to stay in the darker areas first to I kind of use that darker area because I know in the end it's going to get the darkest that we have as far as shade wise with this gray tone that we're doing. So I know it's going to get, like, the eye sockets and the nose are going to get fully covered because that's the way they are in the picture. So it's going to be the darkest points in here. So that kind of gives me an idea of how dark this color is that I made up. It's kind of like testing it, as you will. So that's what we're going to do. And another really quick thing, when I went through the value shade 1 on this, with the first shade of gray here, I very, very lightly put it on. Now in these dark areas, I put it on a little bit heavier, you can tell, but in everywhere else, I put it on very, very lightly. And that's one thing with airbrushing that I love is you can map everything out and use very minimal paint. And then what I like to do is go back in with an eraser. Doesn't work on all surfaces, but it does work on hard surfaces. Canvas, it works pretty well too if you want to try that. But on these metal panels, it works great. You can get an eraser, and I just go through and I start chiseling some of the detail stuff out. And that allows me to just start layering and layering and layering. And every time, as long as you're using not a lot of paint, if you go in there and just hog it on there, it's not going to really erase that easy. It might actually tear the color off. So you want to be really careful with how much paint you put on this when you do this. But if you put it on lightly, kind of like up in these areas right here where it's like really transparent, you can go back in there with your eraser and start punching out and chiseling out those details, which is really, really cool. So yeah, that's what I like to do is I'll put a little bit on and I'll start chiseling a little bit away. And if I mess up for some reason, I know I can't always reverse it by going back to the color before, because the less paint you put on something, the easier it is to fix. Or I'll grab this and I can kind of erase it out of there. So it's kind of like an undo button on your computer. You can always go back through and edit it really, really easily. Now, if you go through here and just blast a lot of paint in these areas, you're not going to be able to, it's not going to be as forgiving. So just keep that in mind when you're doing something like this. The lighter you spray, the easier you can actually go through and fix it. Or if you want to go backwards, let's say that I want to put highlights in this, it's going to be easier for me to go backwards instead of forwards because it's so light and it's so forgiving right now. So that's one thing to keep in mind when you're doing anything airbrush wise, is keep it light. That way, if you do have any mistakes, or if you want to really start adding layers in there and start punching things out, the more paint you put on, the darker obviously it's going to get. So you want to keep it light and just start building those layers up. So I'm going to put you guys on a tripod and we're going to get some stuff done. All right, so I wanted to stop the video so you guys can actually see a better look at just how much darker step 2 is getting compared to what I put on there originally. So right now there's nothing too crazy going on, as you guys saw, but just like I said, I wanted to speed down the video so you guys can actually see. I think you can see a better version of like how it's coming together right now. Not really going too crazy with the details or chiseling anything out. And you know, some areas with the really tight lines, like in the photos, I kind of got that going on in some areas. In this bone area, I've got some stuff going on, but there's really not much detail going into it right now. I'm just constantly building up that foundation until we get to that later darker shade of gray, and then we'll start chiseling out those details. This is almost like looking through a picture. Your mind has to kind of process it that way because you're starting from the ground up. So you're working lighter, 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 then you go darker, darker, darker. And it just constantly keep on layering and layering and layering and everything. And if you put everything where it actually needs to be, this is why it's really important to have a reference, not only for proportion, to get all the proportions right, but to actually see the lighter lights and the darkest darks. That way you can actually process it better because you are building up to that darkest part, and then at that point you're pretty much wrapping everything up and maybe adding some highlights here and there, but after the darkest darks you're pretty much done because you have gotten to that point of layering and layering and layering. So you want to put your color where it needs to be, not just randomly, and that's kind of why I always have black and white versions of everything that I do, because I want to see those lightest lights and darkest darks. Even if this was colored, it would give me a really good idea of where everything's going. So that's just another little trick. I always have a version of black and white, and if I'm doing color, I'll have like a smaller color version. That way I know where I'm going with the color on it. But this one, like I said, is just going to be nothing but gray tones because we are working towards that big project that's coming in. So yeah, we're just going to keep building this thing up and keep chiseling this guy out, and then yeah, we'll go on to the next shade of color. So what you just saw me use at the end of that video, if you caught it, was my freehand pre-made textured stencils. I believe these are Gerald Mendez, if I'm not mistaken. There's multiples you can buy. I don't have all of them, but I got the ones that help me out the most. But you can kind of see the detail that it brings out. Just a little bit of texture goes a long way. You don't want to overkill it because you can overkill it pretty easily. So you want to go kind of light and kind of just build it up and work at it. And you know, like I said, you don't want to just overkill it and just go in there and just darken everything up. Like right here, some of those areas are a little bit darker than what I want, so I'll go through with an eraser and I'll kind of fade those back in. Now, we are pretty much wrapped up on this end of this video. I want to go ahead and finish the rest of this off camera, that way the video is not so long, but you guys get the idea of what I'm doing here. It's just slowly building up those textures and all the spot ends and getting the most out of this phase right now. Not really going too much detail. You kind of see that I put some textured holes in the skull itself around here, but small stuff like that we'll just keep building up, and it just keeps layering and layering and layering, and you get something really cool at the end of it and kind of look almost three-dimensional, if you will. So I just want to give you guys that a little bit up close and personal view of actually doing it in person. You don't get a lot of these videos anymore as far as artists showing what they do and how to do it and their techniques. So hopefully this helps you guys out a lot, and maybe you learned something new. Maybe you got something for me that you've been doing that works for you. If you want to share, that's awesome too. But I think I want to wrap this video up right here. It's going to be a pretty long one already, so don't want to bore you guys too much, but I'm just going to continue on going down and filling the rest of this out. So not much else to do, but just stay tuned for that next video, because we will start getting into some of the detailed work and start popping some of the stuff out and leaving a lot of this right now behind what we're going to put on top of it. So I'm pretty excited. It looks pretty good. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. If you guys like this, if you guys have any more ideas you would like to see, let me know. I'd be glad to share anything. So until next time, guys, later.